I was reborn. Sent back to the very day Richard Sterling, Victoria's father, threw a $10 million check in my face. In my past life, I tore that check into confetti, declaring with self-righteous pride, "True love is priceless." What I got in return was his sneering contempt and Victoria's increasingly frigid gaze. That, and 10 years of abject humility and chasing after her, only to end up stabbed to death in a dark alley by a business rival while trying to protect her at a gala. In my dying moments, the last thing I saw was her face, unmoved, emotionless, as if she were looking a stranger. But this time, I didn't want to be the lapdog who gave everything and ended up with nothing. So, I decided to take the 10 million. 10 million. Leave my daughter. Richard Sterling, chairman of Sterling Corp., held a cigar between his fingers. Through the swirling smoke, his face, bearing a resemblance to Victoria's but hardened by years of authority, was filled with condescending scrutiny. He pushed the gold-embossed check toward me. The motion was gentle, yet carried the weight of a mountain. "Young man, don't say I'm bullying you. This money is enough for someone of your background to struggle for a lifetime to earn. Take it, disappear from Boston, and never appear in front of Victoria again." I looked at the check. The number 10 million was dazzling, the zeros almost blinding. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave, my heart contracting so violently I couldn't breathe. In my past life, this was the moment I felt unprecedented humiliation. I had flushed red, veins bulging in my neck, practically screaming, "I love Victoria, not your money." Thinking back now, it was laughable. I looked up. Richard's eyes held a trace of impatience, as if he had already predicted my outburst of backbone. Beside him stood Victoria Sterling, the ice queen I had chased for 3 whole years. She wore a white dress, looking ethereal, detached from the mortal world. She stood there quietly, her gaze cold, looking neither at me nor her father, as if none of this concerned her, as if I were just a speck of dust in her life, easily wiped away. Not far behind them stood a young man in an Armani suit, his hair slicked back with oil, watching me with amusement. Julian Vance, a famous trust fund baby in Boston, one of Victoria's most fervent suitors and my mortal enemy in my past life. He was waiting to see me humiliated, waiting to see me kicked out like a stray dog. Everyone's eyes were focused on me, waiting for the poor boy's pride show to begin. I took a deep breath, suppressing the emotions churning in my chest. Then, under everyone's stunned gaze, I reached out, not to flip the table, nor to tear up the check. With 2 fingers, elegantly and lightly, I picked it up. I even held it up to the light, pretending to check the watermark. Then, I looked at Richard Sterling and flashed a brilliant, even somewhat grateful smile. "Thank you, Uncle Richard." My voice wasn't loud, but it exploded in the luxurious private room like a thunderclap. The speech Richard had prepared was instantly choked back in his throat, the authority on his face replaced by bewilderment. He had probably imagined 100 ways I would refuse, but he never imagined this. The mocking smile on Julian's face froze, looking like a duck being strangled. And Victoria, the high and mighty goddess whose emotions never wavered, showed a crack in her icy mask for the first time. Her pupils constricted slightly, her red lips parted, but she couldn't utter a word. I carefully folded the check and placed it into the pocket of my washed-out jeans, my movements solemn, as if storing a rare treasure. Then, I stood up and bowed slightly to Richard. "Uncle, rest assured. From today on, I promise I will not initiate contact with Miss Sterling again. I wish you good health and a booming business." Finished, I turned to Victoria, the smile on my face unchanged. "Classmate Sterling, I apologize for the disturbance over the past 3 years. I wish you a bright future." My tone was polite, distant, as if we were just ordinary classmates exchanging well wishes at graduation. Victoria's body trembled imperceptibly. She finally looked me in the eye. In those beautiful orbs, there was no longer coldness, but unprecedented shock, and a trace of complex emotion I couldn't read. Without waiting for her to speak, I turned to leave. "Uh-huh." Julian finally reacted, erupting into ear-piercing laughter. "Alex Mercer, I thought you had some damn backbone. Turns out, you're just a spineless coward who'd sell anything for money. 10 years of feelings, sold for 10 million? You really are cheap." I stopped and looked back at him. In my past life, it was this sentence that made me snap, rushing up to brawl with him, only to be beaten half to death by bodyguards and ending in disgrace. But now I just looked at him calmly. No anger in my eyes, only pity. "Mr. Vance, you must be joking." I spoke faintly. "First, it hasn't been 10 years, it's been 3. Second, it wasn't a relationship, it was my one-sided harassment. Finally, this isn't a sale. This is Chairman Sterling's severance package for my 3 years of hard work. I paused, glancing around at the three of them, the curve of my lips widening. After all, being a qualified lapdog requires capital and energy. 10 million. Not too much, not too little. Just right. With that, I ignored their petrified expressions, pulled open the heavy wooden door, and walked out without looking back. Behind me, there was dead silence. Walking out of the five-star hotel, the summer sunlight stung my eyes, making them sour. I pulled the check from my pocket and unfolded it again under the sun. That string of zeros was so real, it made me want to cry. To hell with love. To hell with dignity. I, Alex Mercer, was reborn. In this life, I love no one. I only love money. I'm done being a doormat. I'm going to be a happy, wealthy bastard. I didn't go to the bank immediately to cash the check. An old fox like Richard Sterling might have pulled a trick like setting a cooling-off period or giving me a bounce check just to watch me make a fool of myself. I took a cab back to my rental in the cramped tenements of Southie. The room was less than 100 square feet, dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of instant noodles and mold. This was the love nest I had lived in for 3 years just to be closer to Victoria's University. Looking at it now, I felt only irony. I opened my 5-year-old battered laptop. The screen lit up, lagging for ages before loading the desktop. I didn't rush. I leaned back in my chair and started to strategize. What was the advantage of being reborn? Information asymmetry. I knew the economic trends of the world for the next 10 years, which stocks would skyrocket, and which industries would become the next big thing. That 10 million wasn't the price of my dignity. It was my seed capital. I opened a stock trading platform and skillfully typed in a ticker symbol, APX. Apex Dynamics. I remembered clearly that tomorrow, this unknown small company would announce a breakthrough patent in chip technology. Within a month, the stock price would go from $5 to $150, a 30-fold increase. In my past life, a roommate bet his savings of $2,000 on this stock and bought a house in cash a month later, while I was working 3 jobs a day just to buy Victoria a designer bag she mentioned in passing. Fate is truly a strange thing. I took out my phone and dialed Victoria's number. It rang for a long time before connecting. Her voice came through, cool as always, but with a hint of urgency beneath the surface. "Alex, what is the meaning of this?" "No meaning," I said flatly. "Just notifying you that I've packed up all your stuff and left it at my door. You can have someone pick it up anytime. Also, I'm changing my number. Don't contact me again." Silence on the other end. I could imagine her frowning, unable to comprehend. "Alex, are you playing hard to get? Trying to get my attention this way? Do you think this is amusing?" I laughed. "Victoria, do you read too many romance novels? Do you think the whole world revolved around you?" "You." I'll say it again. "We're done. No, I should say, we never started. I'm tired. I don't want to chase anymore. That 10 million is what I deserve. That's it. Goodbye." I didn't wait for her reply and hung up directly. Then I pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it into the trash. The world was finally quiet. Early the next morning, I went straight to the bank. To my surprise, the check cleared smoothly. When the text notification showed a long string of zeros in my account balance, I finally felt certain my life was truly restarting. I didn't hesitate. I transferred $9 million into my brokerage account. Then, I went all in on Apex Dynamics. After doing all this, I walked out of the brokerage firm feeling lighter than air. Next, the waiting game. I didn't return to that nauseating rental. Instead, I checked into an executive suite at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Soaking in the oversized bathtub, sipping chilled champagne, and looking out at the bustling night view of Boston, I felt like I was in another world. In my past life, I could only stand at the entrance of hotels like this, looking up at the lights on the top floor, imagining the luxurious banquets Victoria was attending inside. Now I was part of it. Ding! My new phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Alex, where are you? You threw away everything I gave you." It was Victoria. She managed to find my new number. I looked at the accusing text and found it hilarious. The thing she gave me? Just knickknacks she didn't need, a fountain pen, a notebook, always given as if she were tossing scraps to a beggar. But back then, I treated them like treasures. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Then I called room service. "Hello, I need 2 professional massage therapists right now. In this life, I'm going to love myself." For the next week, I lived the lie-flat life I had always dreamed of. Sleeping until I woke up naturally, eating exquisite breakfasts at the rooftop restaurant, killing time in the gym or pool in the afternoon, and experiencing the city's top-tier nightlife in the evening. I bought several fitted suits, replacing my cheap t-shirts and jeans. I found that the saying, "clothes make the man," was entirely true. When I walked into any high-end venue wearing a tailored Tom Ford suit with a Patek Philippe on my wrist, I was greeted with humble smiles and attentive service. No one looked at me with scrutiny or disdain anymore. Money is a man's best armor. As for the Apex Dynamic stock, I didn't even bother checking it daily. I knew it would rise. One night, I invited two stunning models for drinks at a Summit Club, Boston's most exclusive private venue. Deafening music, swaying crowds, the air thick with the scent of money and hormones. In my past life, I wasn't even qualified to enter. Now, I sat in the best booth, enjoying everyone's attention. "Alex, honey, have another drink." The model beside me leaned coquettishly into my embrace. I smiled and pinched her cheek, about to say something when I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure in my peripheral vision. Victoria. Why was she here? She was accompanied by Julian and a few other trust fund kids I didn't recognize. Julian was spouting hot air, while Victoria looked cold and detached, out of place in the noise. She seemed to spot me too, her gaze locking with mine in midair. Her look was complex, surprise, confusion, and a trace of disgust. Yes, disgust. In her eyes, a man like me, using her father's money to live a life of debauchery, was no different from trash. Julian followed her gaze and saw me. He froze for a second, then an exaggerated, mocking grin spread across his face. He pushed aside the people around him and strode toward me. "Yo, who do we have here? Isn't this our famous Alex Mercer, the great romantic?" Julian's voice was loud, deliberately attracting the attention of everyone nearby. "What's up? Spending Uncle Richard's $10 million here? How does it feel? Think you've reached the peak of life?" The rich kids behind him laughed along. "Julian, is this the lapdog you talked about? Doesn't look like much. Selling himself for 10 mil. What a disgrace to men." The two models in my arms looked awkward and moved to leave. I held them down, signaling them to stay. I picked up my glass, swirled the whiskey gently, and didn't even look at Julian. "Mr. Vance, long time no see," I said faintly. "How is your family's business lately? I heard the Vance Group's overseas projects seem to be running into some trouble." Julian's laughter cut off abruptly. His face changed. "What the hell are you talking about?" I smiled and took a sip. "Talking nonsense? That poor project in Southeast Asia, due to local policy changes, isn't it about to be scrapped? And the European Chip Agency rights, weren't they snatched up by Lion Capital? These two deals combined must have cost your family at least $500 million, right?" I knew all this from reading financial news in my past life. Sweat instantly beaded on Julian's forehead. These were his company's core secrets. Outsiders shouldn't know. How did this loser know? "You? How do you know? Did you investigate me?" Julian's voice started to tremble. "Investigate you? Julian, you think too highly of yourself." I set down the glass and finally looked him in the eye. "You're not worth it." I stood up. I was taller than him, looking down from height. "I just want to remind you, mind your own business. Don't go around biting people like a mad dog." My voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable oppression. The jeering around us faded. Everyone sensed something was off. Julian was cowed by my aura. He opened his mouth, but couldn't get a word out, his face turning from red to white, then green. I ignored him, pulled a stack of cash from my wallet, and slapped it on the table. "Ladies, thanks for tonight. Take a cab home." Adjusting my collar, I walked straight past Julian, treating him like air. As I passed Victoria, I paused. She looked at me, the shock in her eyes even more intense than back in the hotel room. She probably couldn't understand how the poor boy who was humble as dust before her just days ago could suddenly become so unfamiliar, so powerful. I curled my lip at her, revealing a meaningful smile. "Classmate Sterling, you need to work on your judge of character." With that, I walked away, leaving behind a dashing silhouette and a floor full of dropped jaws. "You aren't unattainable. I just don't want to climb anymore." Leaving the club, I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove straight to the airport. Boston held too many painful memories from my past life. Since I had secured my first pot of gold, it was time to change locations and start my new life. The plane took off in the early morning, destination, New York City. The international metropolis paved with gold and opportunity. On the plane, I turned off my phone, leaned back in the comfortable first-class seat, and fell into a deep sleep. When I opened my eyes again, we had landed at JFK. Walking out of the airport, breathing the city air, I felt like a warrior reborn. I didn't rush to buy a house. Instead, I rented a long-term penthouse at Central Park Tower, offering a panoramic view of the city. Standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the brilliant Manhattan skyline, I knew this was my real stage. The next day, as soon as the market opened, I received a call from my broker. His voice was trembling with excitement. Mr. Mercer, it's up. Apex Dynamics hit the limit. I just gave a faint MHM. Keep holding. Don't sell until it hits 150. Hanging up, I began to plan my next step. Relying solely on stocks was just fast cash. The foundation wasn't stable. I needed to build my own business empire. Relying on my memories, I knew that in the next few years, digital health, EVs, and artificial intelligence would be the three major windfalls. I spent a week drafting a detailed business plan. I was going to establish an investment firm specifically to snipe these potential startups. 1 month later, Apex Dynamics stock price, just as I predicted, skyrocketed to $150. The funds in my account turned from the initial $9 million into a number that even I found staggering, $300 million. I didn't hesitate to liquidate. I took the profit. With this startup capital, my firm, Sovereign Capital, was officially established in NYC. The office was located on the top floor of One World Trade Center. I began recruiting, using salaries far above the industry standard to poach the top analysts and traders for major investment banks. At first, those elites had complaints about me, a 20-something kid. But after I accurately predicted 3 market circuit breakers and led them to short the market, raking in $50 million in a single day, everyone shut up. The look in their eyes changed from doubt to awe, and finally to fanatical worship. In their eyes, I wasn't just a boss, I was a god. My life became increasingly busy. Endless meetings, endless reports, endless people to meet. I gradually forgot about Boston, forgot about Victoria, forgot those unbearable past events. Until one day, my secretary knocked and entered, handing me an invitation. Mr. Mercer, next week at the Javits Center, there's an international business summit. This is the invitation from the organizer. I took it and glanced at it casually. When my eyes landed on the list of co-organizers, my fingers paused slightly. Sterling Corp. They really were like lingering ghosts. Decline it for me. I tossed the invitation onto the desk. But Mr. Mercer, the secretary said, looking troubled, this summit is very high profile. Nearly half of the global 500 companies will be there. And the organizer, Mr. Harrison Thorne, specifically requested your presence. Harrison Thorne, the son of a legendary tycoon and the host of this summit. I frowned. In my past life, I had only seen this man on the news. Now, he was asking to see me by name. It seemed the reputation of Sovereign Capital had spread. Fine, I nodded. I'll go. I actually wanted to see what expressions the Sterling family would wear when we met again. On the day of the business summit, I wore a custom-made dark blue suit and walked into the convention center surrounded by bodyguards. The venue was filled with dignitaries and high fashion. Everyone who walked past me was a titan, usually seen only in financial magazines. My appearance immediately caused a small commotion. That's Alex Mercer of Sovereign Capital? He's so young. I heard he shorted the market and made $50 million in a day. The man is a god. Heroes come from the youth. Fearsome potential. I ignored the whispers and walked straight to the main hall. As soon as I entered, I saw a few familiar figures. Richard Sterling, Victoria Sterling, and the tag-along, Julian Vance. They were fawning over a man with an extraordinary bearing, bowing and scraping with smiles plastered on their faces. That man had to be Harrison Thorne. Richard looked anxious, seemingly explaining something to Harrison. I could guess with my toes that Julian's family disaster had implicated Sterling Corp. I knew from my past life that the Sterling and Vance families were commercially bound. They rose and fell together. Since the Vance family's overseas projects collapsed, the Sterling family's capital chain must have snapped. They were likely here to beg Harrison for a bailout. Unfortunately, they were asking the wrong person. A shark like Harrison Thorne only adds icing to the cake. He never offers charcoal in a snowstorm. My gaze met Victoria's again. Months later, she looked much thinner, her brows knit with a sorrow that wouldn't dissolve, but she was still heartbreakingly beautiful. When she saw me, she froze completely. The shock in her eyes was 100 times stronger than at the club. She probably couldn't connect this powerful man, surrounded like a star by the moon, with the poor boy playing guitar downstairs who was paid off by her father months ago. Richard saw me too. His expression was magnificent, like he had swallowed a live fly. He opened his mouth, but the name Alex stuck in his throat, impossible to voice. Only Julian, upon seeing me, erupted with venomous light in his eyes. His family was miserable, and he blamed it all on me. If not for what I said that night at the club, how would his family's secrets have leaked? He rushed over heedlessly, pointing at my nose and cursing. Alex Mercer, you despicable villain. It was you. It was definitely your doing. His voice was hoarse and crazy, instantly attracting the attention of the entire venue. My bodyguards immediately stepped forward to block him. I didn't even bother to look at him, walking straight toward Harrison Thorne. Mr. Thorne, a pleasure. I extended my hand. Harrison paused, then extended his hand to shake mine. You must be Alex Mercer? Truly a young talent. His tone held genuine appreciation. You flatter me, Mr. Thorne. Alex, don't get cocky. Just you wait. I won't let you off. Julian was still screaming frantically. Harrison frowned and signaled his assistant. Immediately, security guards rushed over and dragged Julian out like a dead dog. Richard's face was pale. He wanted to plead for mercy, but didn't dare speak. Victoria stared at me, her eyes filled with humiliation, unwillingness, and deep confusion. Mr. Thorne, apologies for dampening the mood. I smiled apologetically. Not at all. Harrison waved his hand, looking at me with interest. I hear Mr. Mercer has been making big moves in New York lately. Sharp eyes, ruthless methods. Small plays, nothing worthy of the main stage. I said humbly. We chatted as if no one else were there, leaving the Sterling father and daughter hanging to the side, embarrassed beyond belief. Richard's old face alternated between red and white. He never imagined the poor kid he dismissed with $10 million would transform into a big shot who could stand as an equal with Harrison Thorne. And he himself had to beg humbly here. Was there anything more ironic in this world? After a long while, he finally mustered the courage to squeeze out a smile uglier than crying and walk toward me. Mr. Mercer, long time no see. He emphasized the title Mr. Mercer heavily. I acted as if I had just seen him, raising an eyebrow in feigned surprise. Oh, isn't this Chairman Sterling? What are you doing here? My words were like an invisible slap across Richard Sterling's face. The muscles in his cheeks twitched, but he forced a smile. Mr. Mercer is joking. For such a major summit, naturally, Sterling Corp came to learn. To learn? I laughed. I heard Sterling Corp's cash flow is tight lately. You're here looking for investment, aren't you? Richard's face instantly turned deathly pale. My sentence had ripped away his last fig leaf in front of everyone. Behind him, Victoria swayed, almost losing her balance. She bit her lip hard, nails digging deep in her palms, looking at me with eyes full of humiliation and anger. I wanted her to feel just 1/10,000th of what I endured in my past life. The feeling of having one's dignity ruthlessly trampled in public. Alex, don't go too far. Victoria finally couldn't hold back, her voice trembling. Too far. I stopped smiling, my eyes turning instantly cold. I'm going too far? When you threw $10 million in my face, why didn't you say that was too far? When you threw out everything I gave you like trash, why didn't you say that was too far? Victoria Sterling, what makes you think you can always be high and mighty? Your pretty face? Or your daddy who's about to go bankrupt? My voice wasn't loud, but every word was a stab to the heart. The blood drained from Victoria's face in an instant. The air around us seemed to solidify. Everyone was stunned by this sudden conflict. Their eyes changed from simple admiration to awe and a touch of fear. This young man had not only skills but a temper. A ruthless character. Harrison Thorne watched the scene with interest, not intervening, as if watching a good show. Mr. Mercer, Richard finally couldn't take it anymore, his voice carrying a plea. The past was our fault. I apologize to you. But please, raise your hand in mercy and let Sterling Corp off the hook. He actually bowed his head to me in public. I looked at his pathetic state and felt no pleasure, only endless sorrow. For people like this, I had given my life in the past. Let you off, I sneered. Chairman Sterling, business is a battlefield. It's either you die or I live. Why should I let you go? As long as Mr. Mercer is willing to help, I am willing. I am willing to transfer 30% of Sterling Corp shares to you, free of charge. Richard threw out a bombshell. The crowd was in an uproar. Although Sterling Corp was in crisis, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Its market value is still several billion. 30% meant nearly $1 billion. He was paying such a bloody price just to beg me. Victoria looked at her father in disbelief. Dad, are you crazy? Richard ignored her, just looking at me with eyes near begging. I looked at him and slowly shook my head. I have no interest in your shares, Chairman Sterling. Richard's heart sank to the bottom. I paused, turned my gaze to Victoria behind him, and the corner of my mouth hooked into a playful smile. However, if Miss Sterling is willing to have dinner with me, perhaps I might consider it. At these words, the hall went dead silent. Everyone's gaze focused on Victoria. There was sympathy, pity, but mostly the schadenfreude of watching a drama. This is the reality of the business world. The weak are meat for the strong, and the winner takes all. When you have enough power, you can trample all rules, including the dignity others pride themselves on. Victoria's body trembled violently. On her stunningly beautiful face, humiliation, anger, unwillingness, pain, all kinds of emotions wove together, making her look like a white lotus about to wither in a storm. She glared at me, a look that wanted to devour me alive. "Alex, keep dreaming." She squeezed the words through her teeth. I shrugged indifferently. "Then there's nothing to talk about." I turned, ready to take Harrison to the VIP room. "Wait." Richard grabbed me, his voice sounding like he was about to cry. "Mr. Mercer, Mr. Mercer, she's immature. Don't hold it against her. One meal, I promise, for her. Not just one meal, 10 meals." He turned his head and shouted sternly at Victoria. "Victoria, what are you standing there for? Agree to Mr. Mercer. Do you want to watch our family go bankrupt?" The standoff between father and daughter became the focal point of the venue. Victoria looked at her stern father, then at my indifferent face, and her tears finally burst forth. That was the first time I saw this Ice Queen cry. Crystal tears slid down her smooth cheeks, carrying a broken beauty. I felt no pity. If you knew today would come, why act so arrogantly before? Every tear you shed is the water that flooded your brain back then. Finally, under her father's coercion and the pressure of reality, she yielded. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she opened them again, only dead silence remained. "Fine," she said, her voice hoarse. "I agree." I laughed. "Good." I took out my phone. "Give me your number. I'll notify you of the time and place." Victoria recited a string of digits. I saved the number, noting it as 10 million miss. Then, I walked into the VIP room with Harrison without looking back, leaving the sterling father and daughter standing there, accepting the strange looks of the crowd. I knew that from today on, Victoria's halo as an untouchable goddess was completely shattered. And all of this was my creation. The thrill of revenge wasn't as strong as I imagined. Instead, there was a faint emptiness. Perhaps when I decided to take that 10 million, this woman had already died in my heart. Everything I did now was just adding a few shovels of dirt to her grave. The meeting with Harrison Thorne went smoothly. He valued Sovereign Capital's potential and my boldness, hoping to cooperate deeply in the new energy sector. This suited me perfectly. We hit it off instantly and signed a strategic cooperation agreement worth $5 billion on the spot. When the news got out, the entire summit shook. Sovereign Capital, a new company established less than half a year ago, leaped to become a hot new noble in the investment world of New York and the entire nation. And I, Alex Mercer, saw my name truly appear in the top financial sections for the first time. At the banquet ending the summit, I was the absolute protagonist. Countless moguls approached with wine glasses, wanting to build connections. I handled them with ease, but my gaze occasionally swept over Victoria in the corner. She sat there alone, isolated, out of sync with the liveliness around her. She had changed into a black evening gown, making her skin look even paler, but also making her look colder and lonelier. Several presumptuous rich kids tried to hit on her, but were forced back by her icy glare. She was like a wounded white swan, holding her head high, licking her wounds. Halfway through the banquet, I received a text from Victoria. Only one word. "Here." The corner of my mouth lifted. I replied with 2 words. "Rooftop." I put down my glass, said a quick word to Harrison, and walked up to the hotel's rooftop terrace alone. The evening breeze was cool and comfortable. I lit a cigarette, overlooking the brilliant city lights below, my heart calm. Not long after, the sound of high heels approached from behind. Victoria walked up. She stood a few meters behind me, saying nothing. We stood in silence. The wind blew her long hair in the hem of her dress, making her look ethereal, as if she might fly away with the wind at any moment. "You've changed," she finally spoke after a long time, her voice broken by the wind. "People always change." I blew out a smoke ring. "Those who don't change get eliminated." "Do you hate me?" she asked again. I turned around and looked at her. Under the moonlight, her face was unrealistically beautiful. Those eyes that used to be cold as frost were now filled with complex emotions. "Hate." I laughed. "Victoria, you think too highly of yourself. Hating someone takes energy, and you aren't worth wasting my energy on." Her body swayed, her face turning even paler. "Then why treat me like this? Treat my family like this? Why?" I sounded like I'd heard a massive joke. "You actually asked me why? When your father threw money in my face, you watched coldly from the side. When Julian humiliated me time and again, you turned a blind eye. I gave everything for you, but in your eyes, I was worthless. Now you ask me why." I stepped closer to her, my powerful aura making it hard for her to breathe. I'll tell you why. I leaned down and whispered in her ear, because it makes me happy watching you fall from the clouds, seeing your ridiculous pride trampled under my feet. It just feels good. Victoria's tears surged out again. She couldn't control her emotions anymore and raised her hand to slap me. A crisp smack rang out on the quiet rooftop. I didn't dodge. My face burned with pain. This slap seemed to break the last thread of connection between us. I touched my face and smiled. Good. I straightened up and looked at her. This slap can be the interest you pay. Tomorrow night at 7, the River Cafe. I'll be waiting. Remember, dress beautifully. With that, I threw the cigarette, but on the ground, crushed it with my toe, and turned to leave, leaving her alone in the cold wind on the rooftop, crying her heart out. The next evening, I arrived early at the River Cafe. I had booked the entire restaurant. Outside the massive windows lay the most brilliant night view of the Brooklyn Bridge and Manhattan skyline. Melodious violin music echoed in the room. Candles were lit on the table along with fresh roses. The atmosphere was romantic to the extreme. At 7 sharp, Victoria appeared. She had obviously dressed with great care. A fitted black Chanel gown outlined her perfect curves. Her hair was pinned up, revealing a swan-like neck, and exquisite makeup covered yesterday's fatigue. She was beautiful, like a painting, but inside those eyes lay emptiness and numbness. She sat opposite me, like a puppet without a soul. Order whatever you want. I pushed the menu toward her. She didn't look at it, just said faintly, whatever. I didn't force it, and ordered a few of the restaurant's signature dishes for her. Throughout the meal, we didn't speak. Only the sound of cutlery hitting plates and the occasional boat whistle from outside. The atmosphere was oppressive enough to suffocate. I slowly cut my steak, enjoying her restlessness. I knew she was waiting for me to speak, to state my conditions. But I wouldn't. I wanted her to suffer through the anticipation. The meal lasted a full 2 hours. When the waiter cleared the plates and brought dessert, Victoria finally couldn't take it. What exactly do you want? She looked at me, a trace of despair in her voice. I put down my fork and wiped my mouth with a napkin. What's the rush? I leaned back in the chair, looking at her leisurely. Miss Sterling, how much do you think tonight's meal is worth? Victoria's face paled. What do you mean? I pointed to the night view outside, then to the food on the table, this meal plus this environment, and my time. Do you think it's worth $1 billion? Victoria understood my meaning. I was humiliating her back with double the intensity of her father's method. Her lips trembled, unable to speak. It seems Miss Sterling thinks it's not worth it. I smiled and snapped my fingers. The restaurant manager immediately walked over, bowing respectfully. Mr. Mercer, how can I help you? Check, please. Certainly. Soon, the bill was brought over. I didn't even look at it and handed it directly to Victoria. Miss Sterling, we'll go Dutch. That's not unreasonable, right? Victoria looked at the long string of numbers on the bill, her hands shaking. This meal cost a full $20,000. She didn't have that kind of money. All her bank cards had been frozen due to the family crisis. I didn't bring money. Her voice was as low as a mosquito's hum. Didn't bring money? I feigned surprise. That's going to be difficult. Miss Sterling, you know I hate it when people owe me money. I stood up, walked to her side, bent down, and said in a voice only the two of us could hear, how about this? You stay behind and repay me. In other ways, my words were filled with a naked implication. Victoria's body went rigid. She looked up, staring at me in disbelief, her eyes full of fear and disgust. She probably thought I was really going to do something to her. Looking at her terrified expression, the last bit of malice in my heart was satisfied. I straightened up, pulled a black card from my wallet, and tossed it on the table. Forget it. For the sake of how beautifully you dressed tonight, this meal is on me. I looked down at her, my eyes full of pity and mockery. Victoria, remember this. The current you isn't even qualified for me to humiliate. As for the Sterling family, I can't be bothered to lift a finger anymore. Sink or swim on your own. With that, I turned and walked away without looking at her again. Behind me came the sound of her suppressed sobbing. This time, I didn't even bother to turn my head. Our story ends here, completely finished. From then on, I never saw Victoria again. I only occasionally saw news about Sterling Corp in the margins of financial reports. Bankruptcy, liquidation, asset auctions, founder Richard Sterling sentenced to prison for illegal fundraising. A generation of Boston nobility vanished just like that. As for Victoria, some said she went abroad with her mother, others said they saw her teaching piano in some third-tier city. Opinions varied, but none of it had anything to do with me. My sovereign capital, with Harrison Thorne's backing, developed smoothly. Within a year, it became one of the top giants in the domestic investment sector. I made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list and became an idol worshipped by countless young people. I had a few female companions, celebrities, models, but it was all just for show. None could walk into my heart. Perhaps having been hurt too deeply in my past life, I had completely lost interest in romance. Until I met Lily Harper. She was a barista at the coffee shop downstairs from my company, a very ordinary girl. She had delicate features, shallow dimples when she smiled, and always wore a washed-out canvas dress. Every morning I would go there to buy a latte. She would always add an extra packet of sugar and smile, saying, "Mr. Mercer, you look working too hard. Here's a little extra energy." Her smile was like the warm winter sun, melting the heart. Once, I stayed up for 3 days and nights straight for an overseas merger. On the fourth morning, I dragged my exhausted body to buy coffee and nearly fainted at the door. It was she who caught me. Without a word, she closed the shop, helped me to the rest area, brought me warm water, and got a towel to wipe my sweat. Her movements were gentle, her eyes full of worry. "Mr. Mercer, you can't go on like this. Your body will collapse." In that moment, looking into her clear eyes, a dusty corner of my heart seemed to be touched. From then on, we gradually got to know each other. I learned she came to the city alone to work for her sick brother's medical bills. I didn't use money to help her directly because I knew it would hurt her sensitive pride. I just anonymously funded the hospital her brother was in, covering all their medical expenses. Then, I continued to buy the latte she made with her own hands, with extra sugar, every day. One day, blushing, she handed me 2 movie tickets. "Mr. Mercer, to thank you for always taking care of business. Are you free this weekend?" I looked at her expectant eyes and smiled. "I am." That was the first time since my rebirth that I smiled from the bottom of my heart. My relationship with Lily developed naturally. She was kind, warm, like a beam of light, illuminating my once dark world. With her, I didn't need to pretend, didn't need to calculate. I could let down all my defenses. We acted like the most ordinary couple, walking the streets on weekend afternoons, eating street food, watching boring romance movies. She never asked how big my company was or how much I was worth. She only cared if I was tired today or what I wanted for dinner. She would knit sweaters for me and silently bring me a bowl of hot rib soup when I worked overtime. This plain and real happiness was something I hadn't experienced in 2 lifetimes. I thought days would pass calmly like this. Until that day, I took Lily to a charity gala. At the entrance of the banquet hall, I saw someone unexpected, Julian Vance. He was much more haggard and down and out than a year ago. His once slick hair was dry, and his expensive suit was replaced by ill-fitting cheap clothes. He wasn't there as a guest, but as a waiter. He held a tray, weaving through the crowd, a fawning and humble smile on his face. When he saw me, and the radiant Lily beside me, his smile froze. Immediately, the flames of jealousy and resentment ignited in those muddy eyes. Like a madman, he threw the red wine from his tray all over Lily. "Bitch!" Everything happened too fast. I couldn't react in time. Lily screamed, her white evening gown instantly stained with shocking red. My mind went blank. The next second, endless rage swept away my reason. I stared at him, nails digging into my palms. I stepped forward and kicked Julie into the ground. Then, I took off my suit jacket, draped it over the shivering Lily, and held her tight. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." My voice wasn't loud, but like an ice pick, it dropped the temperature of the entire hall to freezing. I looked at Julian writhing on the floor like a maggot, murderous intent in my eyes. "Drag him out." I coldly ordered the security guards rushing over. "Break his legs, then toss him into the Hudson." Clear distinctions between gratitude and grudges. Revenge for every grievance. Dare to touch my people, and you must be ready to die. This is my, Alex Mercer's, code of conduct in this life. Julian was dragged away like a dead dog. The banquet hall was silent. Everyone was frightened by my ruthlessness. I ignored everyone, holding the still trembling Lily, and strode out of the hall. Back in the car, Lily finally burst into tears. She wasn't scared. She felt wronged. I held her, patting her back gently, my heart filled with self-blame and lingering fear. If the wine thrown today had been acid, the consequences would have been unimaginable. "I'm sorry, I didn't protect you well," I said, my voice hoarse. Lily shook her head, burying her face in my chest. "It's not your fault. I embarrassed you." My heart ached. What silly talk. I cupped her face, looking seriously into her eyes. "Lily, listen to me. You're not my accessory. You are the person Alex Mercer wants to spend his life with. Whoever dares to make you suffer, I will make them regret coming into this world." Lily looked at me through teary eyes, then nodded heavily. After this incident, I realized that as long as my past existed, Lily's safety couldn't be guaranteed. I had to completely eliminate those potential threats. The next day, I used all my connections and resources to launch a comprehensive, destructive strike against the Vance family. I bought up all the companies chasing Vance family debts, turning them from insolvent to truly destitute overnight. I also dug up evidence of Julian's father embezzling public funds and bribing officials years ago and handed it all to the authorities. A week later, the Vance family completely disappeared from the city. Julian's father was sentenced to life. Julian himself was sent to prison for mob fighting and intentional injury, crimes piling up. I stood in the top-floor office of the World Trade Center, looking out the window. The sky had finally cleared. I turned around to see Lily holding a cup of coffee, standing at the door, looking at me gently. "What are you thinking about?" She walked over and hugged me from behind. I held her hand and smiled, thinking that we should get married. Lily went stiff, then huge joy overwhelmed her. You mean it?" "Of course I mean it." I turned around, took a velvet box from my pocket, and knelt on one knee. "Lily Harper, will you marry me?" Lily covered her mouth, tears flowing again. But this time, they were tears of happiness. She nodded vigorously. "I will." I put the ring on her finger, stood up, and pulled her into my arms. Outside the window, the sun was shining perfectly. I once thought that being reborn was for revenge, to stand at the peak of the world and look down on all living things. But only now do I understand. I was reborn only to meet, once again, someone worth protecting with my life. Wealth and power are ultimately fleeting clouds. Only the person beside you is the truest warmth. The real joy in life isn't how many enemies you trample or how many mountains you conquer. It's when you wash away the glitz, look back suddenly, and find that person is still there in the dim light, making soup for you. Story complete part 2. Mandatory separators.